Final Fantasy. Square Enix. Man, Mike, stay put. What do all these have in common? They are games that Microsoft and companies that Microsoft has a hard time working with. You know, I will say that they've done a really good job in the past when it comes to Square Enix games. We saw a lot of their games go to Game Pass. But according to this Jez Corden article, it does look like, you know, maybe when it comes to Final Fantasy 16 per se, they might have been outbidded by Sony. What's going on, guys? Gaming Out here coming at you with another video. Today we're talking about the fact that it looks like Microsoft may have had the opportunity to get Final Fantasy 16. Now, I don't think it's as clear as day as this. I do think there's a lot of variables that's behind closed doors that not a lot of people are light in. I think that the relationship between Sony and Square Enix, especially right now, has been very essential to keeping this game off the platform. But let's get on to what, you know, Jez Corden said. Let's look at this. All right, so Jez Corden says Square Enix, PlayStation offered a better deal than Xbox for Final Fantasy 16. Now, for those of you that's been following the channel a lot, you know I'm a huge fan of JRPGs. And I feel like it's definitely one of the worst places to play JRPGs is on the Xbox platform. Now, does that mean that they don't get any? No, I would actually say they do a pretty good job at getting older titles to the platform. You know, Persona 5, they got a lot of the Final Fantasies in the Game Pass day and date, like Final Fantasy 10, 7, 8, you know, the remake. They did a decent job getting some of these games on the platform, but we do see issues with them when it comes to specifically Square Enix games. So let's go ahead and read this. A recent interview exposed an industry practice that few are aware of, that is the cost of content acquisition. It's pretty much, they're saying, one of the things that goes on in the industry that a lot of people don't know is how the progress to getting timed exclusives are. That's the way I'm reading this. One of the most issues facing Xbox as of late is its ability to attract interest from third-party publishers. The vast majority of AAA publishers and studios are rarely launching games for Xbox platforms, but many independent developers have been arbitrarily skipping the platform in favor of PlayStation and Nintendo Switch. Few examples of this has been more, than the Square Enix. Pretty much saying it's just really Square Enix. There's a lot of like outliners in the industry, but a lot of it is Square Enix, whose support of Xbox has been historically iffy. Microsoft scored some support from Square Enix a few years back with Dragon Quest and Kingdom Hearts. Like I said earlier, they did release a lot of older Square Enix titles on Game Pass day and date when it came to the platform. But as far as like newer titles, like the next Dragon Quest, I don't know if that's going to be on the platform. You know, I'm very curious to see if the next Final Fantasy that's after this is going to come to Xbox. You know, maybe this is just a 16 and a 7, but, you know, we'll see when it comes to that. Dismissive Xbox than ever. With the most wanted JRPG, Final Fantasy VII Remake, still absent from the platform, despite an inspired exclusivity agreement, and Final Fantasy XIV still nowhere to be found despite pledges by Xbox lead Phil Spencer at a previous event. So, you know, this is, I think that Tokyo Game Show is where he talked about, you know, Final Fantasy XIV supposed to come, you know, that MMO of Final Fantasy was supposed to come to Xbox. It never did, which was interesting because the way he kind of made it seem like that was already in progress. It'd be interesting if that was canceled. You know, I think these events that they're talking about, I think something happened between these events where they brought the older Final Fantasies and they brought, working on bringing Final Fantasy XIV. I think something happened between that point and where we are now. An interview with Game Informer recently shed light on the way that a hotly anticipated action RPG Final Fantasy XVI is skipping Xbox, and it's sadly unsurprising. According to Square Enix, PlayStation simply offered a better content acquisition deal than Xbox did. Final Fantasy is one of Square Enix's most important franchises, up there with Dragon Quest and the Kingdom Hearts franchise. When we do begin development, we do approach multiple platforms, multiple companies, and about releasing the game. And when you approach them, they're going to come back to us with an offer. Square Enix also noted that the deal also offers them high-level platform support with PlayStation engineers to implications that Xbox does not. Square Enix have also, oh no, just, oh my gosh, Xbox optimizing a single platform. Sorry, got tongue twisted a little bit there. It's pretty much saying when they start the progression of making these Final Fantasy games, or any title for that matter, they go to these platforms, especially I would say console manufacturers. They're probably the one that would offer them the most buck. And they're like, look, we're making this game. What can you do for us? And it looks like, at least at the beginning of the, the content creation to these Final Fantasies, because I would say a lot of Final Fantasy games are in development at the same time. So a lot of these deals could have been made around the same time, especially the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think that's a little bit different. I think Sony just grabbed that whole franchise. I don't think it's one of those things where it's not a necessarily if Microsoft's trying. It's the fact that they have their hands tied in terms of legal logistics and stuff going on. I do think we'll eventually get the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I just don't know if it's going to be anytime soon. I'm going to leave this in the description as a source, because I want you guys to go read. I think this is Jez Corden that's saying this. Yeah, Jez Corden. I want you guys to go read this and give your, get your overall opinion on this. There's a little bit more to the article. I don't want to ruin everything that Jez said, so I want you to go in there and look at it. Here's my take on this. When it comes to Square Enix, I think there's a lot of gaming politics going on with that particular game. Did Microsoft offer them any kind of financial support at that time, years ago, when they were making Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy 16? Probably not. But I think at that time it was a different era. I don't think Microsoft realized the amount of effort PlayStation could put in to shut them out from a whole publisher. Because up until that, unless you own that company, like Sony owning Square Enix, it was kind of hard to do something like this to this degree. I don't think it was ever really done in the gaming industry. Sure, you had timed exclusive missions or something like that, but you never really had entire publishers making timed exclusives to one platform. And I think that is where Microsoft and Xbox didn't think about that could happen. I truly believe when they heard, because even though that we heard they bought Bethesda, we know that PlayStation probably was told by Bethesda, your games aren't coming to our platform. We don't need any support from you anymore. So they probably knew months to maybe even a year before it was actually finalized and, they made it public. So I think after that happened, Sony knows that they can't go out and spend the money that PlayStation, that Microsoft and Xbox can spend. So I think this is their response. Look, we're not going to go out there and buy a company such as Square Enix, because sure, we have the money to do it, but it doesn't financially make sense to us and to our investors. At the end of the day, I do think Sony has the money to go out and buy Square Enix, but can they convince their investors to make that kind of commitment? And that's up to be debatable, because when you look at someone like Microsoft and they have all this extra cash lying around, it's easier to convince investors to spend some of that money not sit in the bank getting hit with inflation than it is to convince Sony to take out loans to buy something, or put up their own companies as collateral to buy something, because that's initially what would happen. Now they probably have the free money to go out and buy something like Square Enix. Maybe they have just enough to do something like that, or a little bit more. But once again, when you have the excess amount of cash that Microsoft has, it's easier to get people to make those risks. PlayStation go out and spend a lot of the free money they have, and maybe a little bit of a loan part, which they'll probably spend loans in general because it's easier and tax free for the most part. I could see them doing that because it's easier for them to go out there and buy an entire publisher's games. And let's say not all the games have been fired. Forspoken didn't really turn out well for them. So they'll probably be a little bit more picky when it comes to that. But I think when they saw Project Athena, because that's what, Forspoken was called before it got its real name, they probably were just like, look, do you got games? You do? All right, we want them. And I think that is the response that they had to buying Bethesda. Now that they're buying Activision, you're probably going to see, if they do successfully buy Activision, you're going to see more of this from PlayStation. I think they're going to amp it up. But I do think this is the reason Square Enix isn't on Xbox for the most part. I don't think it's like necessarily anything Xbox can do at this point. Now, I'm not going to like take 100% of the blame. There's some blame to be put on Xbox. They should have maintained those relationships from the 360 era all the way to the Xbox One and through that generation, and it would have been harder for for Sony to go in there, hand it back to them, and just buy timed exclusive for the majority of their games. But anyway, that's my opinion on this article. Like I said, I do think that there was some talk back and forth when it comes to Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 remake. I think after they bought, I think Sony probably got the whole franchise of remake all in one deal. I think for the most part, you're not going to see the remakes come out for Xbox until probably they're all done. Or you might see once the second one launches, the first one's going to launch, and you're not going to get the second one on Xbox until the final one launches. So I think this is actually the final one. I don't know. We'll see. But put in the comment section below how you guys feel about this. We got to keep Xbox held accountable for a lot of things. But this particular thing, I'm not going to hold this over on Xbox. This is a Sony and Square Enix partnership, and I don't think there's a lot Xbox themselves could have did to avoid this fate when it comes to the Final Fantasy franchise and most likely the Dragon Quest franchise. But I appreciate everyone coming through. Like I said, put in the comment section below, do you guys think this is Xbox's fault or Sony's fault? But until next time, this is Gaming Addict. I'm out of here. Peace.